Okay. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Psychologist Against Anti-Semitism speaker series and tonight's webinar on a very timely and important topic, U.S. campus anti-Semitism, how did we get here? My name is Dr. Julie Ansis, and I'm the founder and president of Psychologists Against Anti-Semitism, otherwise known as PASS. PASS was founded approximately 3.5 years ago in the summer of 2021 in response to anti-Semitism within our major psychological organizations. Situation has only gotten worse as far as that's concerned. The mission of Psychologists Against Anti-Semitism is to address and combat anti-Semitism within the field of psychology and related fields, foster training and education that increases responsiveness to anti-Semitism and its effects, and foster Jewish affirming research, education, clinical practice, and organizations. We are composed of over 900 psychologists and other mental health professionals, including faculty, clinicians, administrators, and students. If you wish to learn more and join us, I put the website address in the chat. Complete the form in the link at the homepage, and you will be added to our email list. We also have an X page, an Instagram account, and a Facebook page, and a YouTube channel. Now, on to today's event. The horrific atrocities of October 7th, 2023 in Israel and the ensuing Hamas-Israel war have unleashed a wave of anti-Semitism on the campuses of elite US universities, especially the private ones. This presentation aims at exploring the social, political, and economic influences of how we got here. Our distinguished speaker is Dr. Moshe Vardi. He is a university professor and the George Distinguished Service Professor in Computational Engineering at Rice University. He's the author and co-author of over 750 papers, as well as 2 books. He is the recipient of several scientific awards, is a fellow of several societies, and a member of several honorary academies. Dr. Vardi holds 10 honorary titles, and he's also the senior editor of Communications of the ACM, the premier publication in computing, focusing on the societal impact of information technology. And he has become involved in combating anti-Semitism on his campus, writing several pieces about this in outlets such as Medium. We have several esteemed panelists, Dr. Carrie Nelson, Dr. Jim Pomerantz, and Dr. Corinne Daci. Dr. Daci is the VP of Psychologists Against Anti-Semitism, and she will help field Q&A and questions. This is truly an interdisciplinary audience with clinicians and faculty from the social sciences, computing professionals and faculty, those from humanities, and many other fields. I'm grateful that we have such a diverse audience, and I think it demonstrates the need for an interdisciplinary effort to challenge anti-Semitism on our campuses. Dr. Vardi will speak for approximately an hour or a bit under, and then open it up for discussion and Q&A. So Dr. Vardi, I hand it over to you.
Okay, let's go to the screen. Okay. Screen share. Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, thank you for inviting me to talk to Psychologists Against Anti-Semitism. You know, the events of the past year have been really kind of baffling. And it takes a lot of chutzpah for me to give this talk because I'm not a psychologist, I'm really not a social scientist, I'm just a nerd. Nerd's nerd, as they say. But I like to try to make sense of things. And I'll try to answer it, you know, it's not a scientific answer. I haven't done the research. I'll try to offer a narrative, a story. And the value of the story is for you to see how compelling the story is. And I welcome a discussion and comments and my email here, so feel free later to write to me if you didn't get enough discussion here. So about a year ago, 2 illusions blew up in our face. The first illusion is that the Israel-Palestinian conflict is manageable. Shimon Peres famously said there is a difference between a situation and a problem. The problem you have to solve. The situation you have to manage. Israel and its leadership so that they can manage Gaza. Here is from 2021, a Washington Post headline. They talk about mowing the grass. That is once in a while Gaza gets out of control. You bomb them a little bit. You mow the grass. They become well behaved for another year, and so they thought. Okay, this was the first illusion. The second illusion is our illusion here living in the United States. We knew about anti-Semitism. Okay, this is nothing new. I mean, this is the what happened in Charlotte, the march in Charlotte. I think it was 2017. You will not replace us. We remember the Tree of Life, 2018. We knew that there is anti-Semitism in the United States, but we thought that it is the extreme right and the extreme left. We didn't think that it is in the mainstream. And these two illusions blew in our face. October 7 was when the manageability illusion blew in our face. This is the supernova concert, the massacre at supernova. Utterly shocking events. But the other illusion blew up on October 8th when protests started just the next day, and about 35 student organizations signed a declaration in Harvard. We'd understand student organization hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for the unfolding violence. Entirely responsible. Okay? This was on October 8th. So we found ourselves really, in some sense, to me, in the United States, in a new world. And that's kind of, I'm trying to make sense. There is a question, how did we not see it? But what really happened? How come that anti-Semitism is in the mainstream of our own campuses? Now, things happen actually somewhat even before. In just a few weeks before, Rice Pride, it's a student club, and its partnership with Houston Hillel, because of Houston Hillel relationship with Israel. So there were just 3 weeks. The proximity just blows me away. This was in just 3 weeks before October 7. But I should have seen there were early signs, and I didn't fully comprehend them. Because in the fall of 2022, a group of Rice students want to start a new club, Students Supporting Israel, to counteract more and more activity by Rice Students for Justice in Palestine, HAP. So they sent their application to the Student Association, and it was declined. And here was the response. I'm quoting verbatim. The club did not get the approval votes needed for the club to form. While the executive committee member have not explicitly cited reason for not approving the club, I believe, this is the communication person from the Student Association, I believe that the strong political nature focused on the contentious topic was the general reasoning. I was asked to be an advisor for the club, and when I saw this, I sent a reply not only to the Student Association, but to also the Student Affairs at Rice. And I said, I'm astonished. You have HJP, which is approved in spite of its political nature, and now you're not approving a student for supporting Israel. I said, this is the appearance of discrimination. I didn't want to use the anti-Semitism word, but it was hidden there. And indeed, I have to give credit to our Student Affairs. They stepped in, and within about 24 hours, the club was approved. But I didn't realize this is a harbinger of things to come. Now, what happened after October 7? Just 3 weeks later, Rice faculty circulated a petition of solidarity with Palestinians. The petition was a lengthy petition, 1,100 words. In this 1,100 words, there were 11 words about the October 7 massacre. The hostages were not even mentioned. And when it referred to Israel, it was not Israel, it was the Israeli Zionist state, which is the standard terminology kind of not given recognizing Israel as the Israeli state, Israel. Amazingly, I later ran and checked, several of the signatories are members of Rice Office of DEI, and I'll come back to it. So these are officers of Rice University signing this incredibly biased petition. By December, the Student Association passed a resolution supporting the faculty statement. Now, the essay, Student Association, the essay resolution was even more biased. It did not even mention October 7, not even in a word. And amazingly, they call on Rice president to affirm its commitment to the culture of care for Palestinian, Arab, Muslim student body, faculty, staff, and community. The fact that Jewish students and Israeli students need care was not even mentioned. This is not a resolution by HJP. This is a resolution by the Student Association Center. When that resolution passed, I decided to just go out public and describe what I'm seeing. And I wrote an article that went viral, a moral wrote at Rice University. And I'll just quote myself one paragraph. I'm a second-generation Holocaust survivor. I recognize anti-Semitism when I see it. You do not need to be a user of derogatory epithet to be anti-Semitic. Using double standard qualifies. It is okay to criticize Israel. It's not okay to pay lip service to Palestinian atrocities. It is okay to call for a ceasefire, but not okay to ignore the hostages. It is okay to call for a two-state solution, which I strongly support, to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is not okay to quote the Palestinian Nakba, the Palestinian about the Nakba, referring essentially talking about Israel and Palestinian liberation, hinting at ethnic cleansing. I should have seen the double standard even in October. A conversation with a colleague, and he's telling me that he's very upset about what's happening in Gaza. And I said, what's happening in Gaza is a tragedy. But I don't remember you being upset during the Battle of Mosul. So first he asked me, what was the Battle of Mosul? Remind me. And I had to remind him that just 7 years ago, in 2017, there was a fierce battle, a year-long battle, urban area of the Iraqi military with the help from the US and the UK, trying to take ISIS out of Mosul. Again, many thousands of civilian casualties. And I'm quoting almost verbatim. And he said me, look, when Arabs kill Arabs, we're not upset because we have low expectations of them. But we have high expectation of Jews, so we get upset when Jews kill Arabs. And I was stunned because he was able in one sentence to be both anti-Semitic and anti-Arab. Basically, he was saying that Arab life is not intrinsically worthy unless Jews are doing the killing. So the question is, what happened? How did U.S. higher institution and its elite members, Harvard, MIT, UPenn, Rice University, how do they become incubator of anti-Semitism? Farid Zakaria on CNN asked, how did America's elite university go from being the kind of asset the world look at with admiration and envy just 8 years ago to becoming object of ridicule today? What happened? This is the question I'm trying to answer. Now, the basic answer was given by social psychologist, many of you probably know him, Jonathan Chait, and he wrote an article in New York Magazine in October, shortly after October 7. And he said, at fault here is what he called the oppressor-oppressed morality. And he said, it's not just about the Middle East, it's a broader morality. And he defined it as the legitimacy of a tactic can only be assessed with reference whether it is being used by the oppressor or the oppressed. For example, we had when we had the horrid George Floyd murder, and it gave rise to protest. Protests gave rise to riots. Riots gave rise to looting, and many people were reluctant to condemn the riots and the looting, because it's done by the oppressed. They have permission to behave in that way. And so the Palestinians are now considered people of color. They are the oppressed. The Jews are white, they are oppressor, they are powerful. This is the old myth of Jewish power. So that's it. That's in a nutshell. You take identity politics, you combine it with classical anti-Semitism. And, if you're curious about Jewish power, I can show you my smartphone where I have an app where I can control the Jewish space lasers. Okay? So we have identity politics and very classic old-fashioned anti-Semitism has been called, not by me, the unvarying perpetuity of an ancient persecution, and at least the myth of Jewish power go back a long time. So let's go, and the fact is that this whole thing, facts do not matter in here. It's about opinion that have nothing to do with facts. For example, the people who protest, who says the Jews are white settlers, they have no idea the majority of the Jewish population in Israel is of non-European descent. All the Jews in Israel, of course, are rich. Well, the poverty rate among Jews is about the same as it is in the general population. Okay. On the other hand, Jews comprise just over 2% of U.S. population, but hate crimes, they represent 60% of all religious hate crime. This is FBI statistics. Now, there is a big debate, is from the river to the sea, is this anti-Semitic or not? And I'm really not interested in this debate. Here is a set of chants on the right encampment, which took place last April. Zionists get out, free Palestine. So when they say Zionists get out, whom are they talking about? Who are these Zionists who should get out? They're not talking to people who are adherent of Zionism as an ideology. They're talking about Israeli Jews. They're talking about me. So whether this is what I call Israelophobia, and whether it's anti-Semitism or plain racism, it doesn't matter. This is hate. And so the big debate is exactly anti-Semitism or not. To me, it seems irrelevant here. So let's go back and try to understand where does identity politics come from. So the standard definition is, this is Wikipedia, politics depends based on particular identity, ethnicity, race, nationality, religion, gender, sexual orientation, etc. And Wikipedia said the term identity politics dates to the late 20th century. So this is very recent. This is something of the past generation. Where does it come from? This is something that kind of, now we are, of course, very familiar with us, but it's very, very recent. Where does it come from? So let's go back to the left-right political spectrum. Where does the term left and right come from? For this, we have to go to the French Revolution, or before the French Revolution. In the French National Assembly, if you're the monarchist, you sit on the right, the monarchists sit on the right, and the anti-monarchists sit on the left. So this was originally left-right. Are you a monarchist or anti-monarchy? But eventually monarchy, instead of monarchy, it became about power. So by the time you're in the middle of the 20th century, is right support is associated with the powerful classes, and the left is associated with the weak classes. So if you look 20th century, you have the Democrats, the New Deal. This is the left of the early and middle 20th century, and the Republicans are pro-business. This is traditional division of left and right. But something happened in 1981. Ronald Reagan became president and unleashed neoliberalism. Margaret Thatcher did the same thing in 1979 in the UK. So what is neoliberalism? Essentially what some people call laissez-faire or market fundamentalism, just total belief in market. So economic liberalization, austerity, privatization, deregulation, monetarism, tax reduction, globalization, free trade. Neoliberalism did give the United States an economic boost, and some people think that that's what gave rise, that's what eventually collapsed the Soviet Union. Max Boot recently published a biography of Ronald Reagan, and Mr. Reagan gets too much credit for the collapse of the Soviet Union. The real credit should go to Gorbachev. But neoliberalism took, I mean, this is, I consider to be the most misguided book in history. It's The End of History by Francis Fukuyama, 1989. The triumph of the Western idea is evident, first of all, in total exhaustion of viable systematic alternatives to Western liberalism. And by that he meant democracy and capitalism. This is it. We have found it's the end of history. The same way that Marx predicted another end of history, this is the other type of end of history. So this is where we are at the late 80s, especially with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Western capitalism, democracy won. But now Democrats have a problem. They are the left. They are socialists, so to speak. So what do? They had to move to the right. So we had the New Democrats. Today we are not using the phrase anymore, but I remember the New Democrats. Bill Clinton led the New Democrat. And basically he moved the party to the right. So the phrase, the era of big government is over. Some people think it was Ronald Reagan that said it, but it was actually Bill Clinton in his second State of Union address, 1996. And NAFTA, Clinton. In fact, it was George W. Bush under George W. Bush, China joined the WTO, but it was actually led by Bill Clinton with U.S.-China trade agreement. Very similar trend in the UK with New Labour. Essentially, again, Labour moved to the right. In 2002, after she already left office more than a decade, in an interview, Margaret Thatcher was asked, "What was your greatest achievement?" And she said, "Tony Blair and New Labour." She was so proud that she was able to move Labour at least to the center. Now, while it may have been, neoliberalism may have good for economy in the aggregate, how did it work for the working class? Not so well. Here's an article by Jefferson Cowie in Foreign Affairs in 2016. A stunning U-turn in the fortune of poor and working class whites began in the 1970s as deindustrialization, automation, globalization, and the growth of high technology and service sector transformed the U.S. economy. In the decade since, many blue-collar jobs have vanished. Wages have stagnated for less educated Americans. Wealth is accumulated at the top of the economic food chain, and social mobility has become vastly harder to achieve. So, this is one trend. How did Democrats reacted to that? Remember, they moved to the center, or to the right, or at least to the center, and the working class are not doing well. Well, the Democrats abandoned them, essentially. Lily Geismer, in the book Left Behind, the Democrats lost interest in working class people and started courting Silicon Valley and college-educated urbanites. Michael Powell, the more democratic party, in liberalism itself, is to a substantial extent a bastion of college-educated, upper-middle-class professionals. So much so that Donald Trump was able to bypass the Democrats and start talking to working-class people, while Hillary Clinton called them a basket of deplorables. Now, I have to say, Biden is a little bit of old-fashioned Democrat, so it's hard to say. I mean, the last administration was somewhat different. We'll have to see where the Democrats are going. But we have to look at another big trend of the past, by now, 75 years plus, and that's the rise of social liberalism, which I think is overall a very positive trend. You can go, and I would say it started with Truman integrating the armed forces in 1948. They were not integrated during World War II, but after the war he integrated them. By the mid-60s, Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act. Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment in 72. It never became an amendment, never was finally approved. 1973, Roe v. Wade passed until recent decision. Clinton, 93, don't ask, don't tell. Obama even say, okay, remove the ban on homosexuality. 2015, same-sex marriage. Me Too, Black Lives Movement, the Great Awakening. Biden declaring Title X protecting LGBTQ. So lots of liberation movement, a social liberation movement. even to the point, most people think when you say Norman Rockwell America, they think it's referred to this old style, old-fashioned America. But this is, I discovered this painting. This is also Norman Rockwell. The poem we all live with. And this is mid-60s, and he shows a little black girl who needs a U.S. Marshal to protect her when she goes to school because of integration. So you have these two things coming together. On one hand, the Democrats kind of abandoned what I would call economic liberalism, or at least economic caring for the working classes. They moved to the center. And they care more and more about social liberalism. And so identity politics emerges. This is the, so to speak, the religions of the progressive. Thomas Piketty, in his book Capital and Ideology, when people are told there is no credible alternative to the socio-economic organization and class inequality that exists today, there's no other alternative, it is not surprising that they invest their hopes in defending their borders and identities instead. Susan Neiman, a philosopher, in a recent book, Left is Not Woke, it begins with concern for marginal persons and ends by reducing each to the prism of their marginalization. And then politics, sometimes many people criticize it focuses more on form rather than on substance. For example, you have a Gemini software from Google, and it wants to be diverse. So it portrays Nazi soldiers in a diverse fashion, black, female, etc. This is the identity politics taken to an extreme. Now, of course, the Republicans reacted to that by declaring the culture war, which is in fact something that started already in the 60s. If you want, the Southern strategy was the response to the civil rights movement. The Republicans realized they have a chance of flipping the South. People forget the South used to be solid blue. There is a phrase, yellow dog Democrat. I would vote for yellow dog if that dog is a Democrat. And the Republicans realized they can flip the South by telling them, we are now the racists. Now, of course, you couldn't say we are racist, so you use a dog whistle, state right. And then Reagan was able to do the same thing with the evangelical, after all, moving the evangelical to the Republican side. Again, Fareed Zakaria, politics is moving away from the left-right divide over economics to an open-closed one, centered on cultural issues such as immigration, identity, and multiculturalism. So if you see now, what is Trump running on? Immigration. And again, it becomes come to extreme. An article in Texas Monthly just a month ago. A 42-year-old former U.S. patrol agent with spiked dirty blonde hair, Blair, come to College Station to lead an event titled provocatively, Globalists Want You Eating Bugs. Okay, this is an extreme version now of the culture war. The globalists want you to eat bugs. Now let's go back to neoliberalism, because it's easy to think about it just as economic. But in a book, Undoing the Demos from 2015, Wendy Brown, I think, put it right. He said neoliberalism is not just an ideology that favors the market. Rather, it disseminates the model of the market to all domains and activity, even where money is not the issue, and configure human beings exhaustively as market actors, always, only and everywhere as homo economicus. And now, by 2000, people are already writing books about the neoliberal university, because we live in the same society. And neoliberalism has also affected universities. If you want to know even why, because you look at university governing boards, they're made of business people. Now, they're usually well-meaning people. You know, they're not getting paid for this service on board. In fact, they're very generous usually. But their value system comes from the business world. And they say, well, why don't universities run like businesses? And that's what has happened to academia. So let me get a little digression. What is the purpose of higher education? To me, the best definition is in the 1940 AEUP statement about academic freedom. Institutions of higher education are conducted for the common good. This is the purpose. You look at Rice's mission statement. What are we talking about? What is rights about? Path-breaking research, unsurprised, unsurpassed teaching, and contribution to the betterment of the world. Come to rights, usually. How much are we talking about betterment of the world? Very little. We talk about teaching and research. Betterment of the world, not much. And if you look at the conversation in universities, it's money and prestige. We have a new vice president for research. What is his mission? Double research funding. And Harry Lewis, a professor of computer science in Harvard, already wrote in 2007 about Harvard, excellence without a soul. Does liberal education have a future? Rice recently ranked in top 20. Now we all know that these rankings are meaningless, but we cannot stop ourselves from chortling. Oh, look at us, we are in the top 20. Now, what does it take to be in the top 20? Well, you have to look at the criteria by US News and World Report. And one of the criteria is selectivity. So the more students we reject, the better we look. So it becomes a value to reject students. The New York Times, from a magazine from 2023, come up with a very clever cover page, not you. And it's a pun on university and universities that reject most of the applicants. If you get more applicants, you reject more, you go up in the ranking. And we have become obsessed with the meritocracy. Today, to be admitted to elite university, you need parents that have the ability to invest in your education from birth till you are 18. And that means only usually middle class and upper middle class students can make it to elite universities. So in the book, the meritocracy trap, he said that this is not aiding social mobility. To the contrary, it's entrenching the current division between working class and educated professionals. And again, New York Times talked about why does Duke have so few low-income students? The biggest lack of diversity in universities is lack of economic diversity. And again, the graphic artist show us the cup made of dollar sign. Okay, we have very, very few low-income students on the campuses of elite universities. And to the point that in 2022, the New York Times asked all of its columnists to write a column, I was wrong about X. Tell us what were you wrong about. And David Brooks, who is a conservative columnist of the New York Times, wrote, I was wrong about capitalism. And he wrote, the most educated Americans were amassing more and more wealth, dominating the best living areas, pouring advantages into their kids. A highly unequal caste system was forming. And Forbes, not exactly a leftist magazine, had in July 2023, how the admission practice of elite universities perpetuate the advantage of the wealthy. August 2023. New study investigates how elite colleges favor rich kids. So this is, I would say, the contradiction of higher education. You go to higher education, you look at the faculty, they tend to be liberal. They're partly liberal because they chose to go to academia and they didn't choose to go to business. This is the one filter, that's why they tend to be more liberal. People that care more about money don't go to academia. The students, they are usually coming from educated professionals. That's today the homeland of liberalism. But the same university are not shy about investing in private equity, which has become, there is a book about private equity, Plunder. Private equity plan to pillage America. Okay, this is, you know, you can look at different investment and ask what's their social benefit, societal benefit. But private equity, there is agreement that this is essentially abuse of the economic system. We talk very little about the common good. We talk very little to our students about the common good. We have economically non-diverse population. So there is contradiction between the liberalism and the reality of campuses. So how do we react to this? I think we react to this by making DEI the religion of campuses today. So Rice has office of DEI. We do not have offices for betterment of the world. That gets lost in the shuffle. There is one course that every Rice student have to take, and this is analyzing diversity. If you apply for the faculty position in the School of Engineering, you have to write 3 statements. One about teaching, one about research, and one about diversity, not about betterment of the world, which is an emission statement, about diversity. And many people say that everybody knows that if you're going to write in your diversity statement anything heretical, you have no chance. This is basically coerced speech. It's ideological pledge of allegiance. And people who come widely to criticize DEI end up being canceled. This has become the religion of elite higher education. So much so that here is the course at try. Chemistry 125. This is a real course. I'm not making it up. Chemistry 125. Afrochemistry. Long title, Afrochemistry, the study of Black Lives Matter. Students will apply chemical tools and analysis to understand Black lives in the US. And this is a chemistry course. And I mentioned before the RISE DEI office. So I mentioned that many of the members of the staff of this office signed this anti-Semitic petition or one-sided petition. But in October 14, 2023, the Associate Vice Provost for RISE, on this campus, will ask you to engage in civic disobedience. So you have an officer of the corporation, an officer of Rice University, telling students it's okay to break rules. Now, no wonder that Rice has not enforced its rule. If its officer says it's okay to break rules, of course the rules have not been enforced. A week later, a few days later, a vigil in the Multicultural Center courtyard, which is part of the DI office, honoring our Palestinian martyr. Somebody asked, does this include the Hamas fighter? The answer was no comment. In May 2024, a pro-BDS poster was posted in front of the Multicultural Center. It violated all rules about postering at RISE. It was there. It was large. It was there for a long time. It was eventually blown away by Beryl. And my theory is that God sent the hurricane to smite the poster. No wonder that David Brooks wrote in November 2023, universities are failing at inclusion. Inclusion does not include Jews. And then I cannot forget that there is also an academic side to the oppressor-oppressed ideology, because it comes from core ideologies today, or I call it school of thought, but I put thought in quotes because there are more ideologies than thought. Postmodernism. There's no truth, only power. I'm actually a little familiar with Gödelian paradoxes, and I would just mention it. This sentence is a Gödelian paradox. Because where does it come from? Where is the knowledge? Where is the truth of that statement? Does it also come from power? Critical theory, liberate people from all form of oppression. Post-colonialism, again, about liberation. But it's not just about scholarship. The problem is that these have become ideologies of activist scholarship. And the book came in 2020, Cynical Theories, how activist scholarship made everything about race, gender, and identity, and why this harms everybody. So because of these ideologies, the oppressor-oppressed mentality finds its home very easily in the humanities and the social sciences. And the next thing you lead is settler colonialism. So last year at Rice, we had a speaker, and I was listening, and I thought this was just, I'm sorry, but a bunch of bull. I was very curious, and I just went to look at her homepage, and this is how she described herself. I kid you not. I thought this may look like a farce. This is someone's actual homepage. My work on feminist and queer theories to examine ecology, materiality, and contemporary art in the context of settler colonialisms. And once you go with settler colonialism, then the next you have a faculty member at Yale posting on October 7th. My heart is in my throat. Prayer for the Palestinians. Israel is a murder, genocidal settler state, and Palestinians have every right to resist through armed struggle solidarity. So this is solidarity with the atrocities of October 7th. In fact, if you look at student for justice in Palestine, you can go to the website, and this is how they describe themselves. National Students for Justice in Palestine, supporting 350 students, Palestine Solidarity Organization, called Occupied Turtle Island, so-called North America. Because if you are talking about settler colonialism, what is the largest, most successful settler colonialism project? It's North America. And so it's not surprising that you have in Colombia, they already post about divestment. Divestment is not an incrementalist goal. True divestment necessitates nothing short of total collapse of university structure and the American empire itself. And not to mention that calling Israel settler colonialism is a complete ignorance of history, complete ignorance of history. So what do we need to do? Where do we go from here? One, I think we need to rethink DEI. And I'm not the only one who said it. This is now, everybody understands. We need to do, people talk about DEI 2.0. It's not, the goal of diversity is not wrong by itself. Diversity, equity, inclusion as a goal, it is not wrong. I fully support it. But it is being made into a caricature. Stephen Means, inside our education, the next generation DEI program will adopt a more holistic approach that embraces the full spectrum of human identity. And I would say in particular, economic, the biggest lack of diversity on campuses, on elite university campuses, is lack of economic diversity. New York Times in August, DEI is not working on college campuses. We need a new approach. Just a few days ago, about the University of Michigan, a decade and $250 million later, faculty and students are more frustrated than ever. We need to rethink DEI 2.0. But it cannot just be about DEI. DEI cannot be the only moral virtue of universities. We have to reclaim the mission of the common good. That's what universities are about. Yes, we need money. Of course, money makes the world go around. Yes, prestige helps. But they are just means. We forgot what is our core mission. Core mission is the common good. And our biggest failing is when we're not talking to our students. We're educating the leaders of tomorrow, and the message they get in elite university is you're very smart, you got great education, go have a great career, and be generous to us. No one talks to them about societal responsibility. And in fact, I'm not the first one who said it. John Nixon in 2011, higher education and the common good, imagining the universities. We must reimagine higher education as a social, civic, and cosmopolitan good that is central to the well-being of civil society and its citizens. We need to think beyond just the universities. Okay, here is a recent article from The Nation. Now, if you don't know, The Nation is a very leftist magazine. And they're saying, wait a minute, their title, What's Left After Wokeness? And they said, traditionally, the left was concerned with universal justice, which including the right to speak up about each group's own problems, but was never confined to it. Thanks to the combination of ideologies that took hold at the end of the 20th century, including neoliberalism and evolutionary psychology, we've come to normalize the idea that self-interest is the only thing that motivates us to action. That is actually a right-wing philosophical assumption, because it does away with what we say universality of humanity. But it can't be just about the left. I would say here is what's happening. We talk about what happened in the United States after neoliberalism. I'll put one chart. Here is what you see happen over 50 years, from 1962 to the middle of the 2000s, okay, before the pandemic. The pandemic kind of scrambled things. But you see here that in 1962, the top 1% of income earner made about 13% of the income. And the bottom 20% made about 19% of the income. And then you go forward 50 years and you have a complete reversal. The top 1% is now making about 20% of the income. And the bottom 50% are making 12% of the income. And this happened, we're responsible for this. We as citizens, we let that happen. And if we want to, this country right now feels to me, United States feels to me like a broken country. And if we want to try to go into a different direction, to me, this chart is where we need to start. Thank you very much.
Okay, Moshe, thank you so much for this very interesting talk. I'm going to hand it over to Corinne to help moderate, and perhaps people either want to write in the Q&A or be promoted as panelists. Corinne, I'll leave that up to you to manage.
Thank you. And thank you, Moshe, for this interesting talks and for all the ideas that you shared with us. I just want to remember that everyone can post their questions in the Q&A. So if you want to go ahead and do it. But maybe what I can do first is invite our two other panelists, James Pomerantz and also Carrie Nelson. Maybe, James, we can start with you. I'm wondering if you have thoughts or about what Moshe has shared with us so far. James, you're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. Yes, I think everybody on the Zoom has thoughts on what Moshe said. Moshe has grappled with many different problems today, and it would be great if we could make some headway on solving them. This is a tough set of problems we're dealing with, and we can't pretend otherwise. But for anyone who's wondering whether the views that Moshe just aired are widestream or mainstream versus there being radical views that are solely his own, I'd like to direct your attention to the work of Erwin Chemerinsky, who for the last 7 years has served as the dean of the law school at Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley. He has a really interesting opinion piece in today's New York Times entitled, let me get it right, College Officials Must Condemn On-Campus Support for Hamas Violence. And it largely echoes Moshe's main points on the university's response or lack thereof to October 7th. And let me just quote a few of the things that this article says. It notes that, quote, the anti-Israel rhetoric at some schools is frightening in its celebration of Hamas's violence and the repeated glorification of the massacre of more than 1,200 people last year on October 7th, which was the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. A sign posted on the Berkeley campus read, Israel deserves 10,000 October 7ths. At Columbia University, the group Apartheid Divest posted an essay calling the Hamas attack a moral, military, and political victory. The same group rescinded its criticism of a student who'd said in a disciplinary hearing there that, quote, Zionists don't deserve to live, and be grateful that I'm not just going out and murdering Zionists. So Chemerinsky concludes that, let me get this right, regardless of one's views on the conflict in the Middle East, the celebration of mass murder can only be condemned. This support of violence is deeply disturbing, but so is the silence of school officials. Does anyone think that officials would be silent if there were a Ku Klux Klan gathering on a college campus celebrating white supremacist violence? Respect for the First Amendment protecting free speech does not mean universities can or should do nothing. So Moshe's hardly alone. Tom Friedman, another very well-known opinion writer, shares many of Moshe's views. And I think it's important to keep in mind Moshe's repeated admonitions that it's not okay. It's okay to criticize Israel, but it's not okay to do so while giving a pass to those who have attacked Israel. So my main comment would be, what do we do now? Which I think is one thing that Moshe just said. And I think a good place to start is focusing on what universities can start doing and what they can stop doing. One thing they can stop doing that's sort of a no-brainer is to stop taking sides on political issues on which they have no particular expertise. But once you start going down that road, it's a slippery slope, as the folks at UPenn and Columbia and MIT and Harvard discovered the hard way recently. And I think one thing that universities can start doing, just to close, is to encourage research on what causes these repeated forms of violence. Yes, we're focusing now on Hamas and Israelis and on that conflict, but in addition to being part Jewish, I'm part Irish. And if you look back at the history of Ireland over the past 2 millennia, it's hard to find even a single century in which there wasn't a massive war occurring. I think the fundamental causes for this ongoing research is the cycle of revenge. And I believe very little research is being done on this, whether it has to do with countries at war with one another or the gang war between the Blood and the Crips in LA. It's just violence feeding on violence, begetting more violence. And it would be nice if we had some findings come out of this. Back about 30 years, when Rick Stoll and I were thinking about proposing what became the Baker Institute, we certainly were moving in that direction, and we appointed Ed Jurigian, who was at that time U.S. Ambassador to Israel, as the first director of the Baker Institute. I think they've done wonderful things, but it's time to really up the game on that. So my question, to go back to Moshe, would be: Moshe, can you recap for us what you believe is the single most important thing that universities can do to address the problems that you've so clearly articulated?
I would start is that we have become a bastion of privilege. I mean, we must look at the mirror. We become a bastion of privilege, okay? Now, of course, the students are very good, but the point is that, instead of looking at what happened to our society and trying to see, can we address the growing inequity in our society, we kind of join in. We join in on economic privilege, and then we find an outlet for that in other type of diversity. Unless we acknowledge that we are very undiverse economically, okay, we have to go back to Marx. Everything has to be about class and economics. Unless we go back there, this is the elephant in the room. A lack of economic diversity. That's what we have, I think, in my opinion, we have to start addressing. And it means that we may not just say, okay, we are going to admit only the most talented students. We'll have to try to say, how can we contribute to the betterment of society?
Thank you, Moshe, and thank you, James. Carrie, I'm wondering if you would like to also comment on what you heard tonight.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I should say that I am largely on the same page as Moshe. If you were hoping to get a passionate disagreement with what he said, you picked the wrong kid. I mean, I've been making some of these same arguments quite a bit. If I were to raise one critique, I would turn it not just against what you said, but what I've said so far in my own work, I think it's a defining absence for both of us. I mean, I think you did a really good job of outlining some of the major social and economic forces that have affected the development of the US in the last two generations. And I think that's there very clearly. And I think you've identified some of the main forces that have operated on campus as well. What's missing, I think, and I don't have a good explanation for it either, is what explains the incredible meteoric rise, the flood of anti-Semitism that swept American campuses in the wake of 10/7. The because I don't think we would have anticipated it. We knew very well that once Israel started a bombing campaign in Gaza, and once there was an actual ground invasion of Gaza, that international sentiment would turn against Israel pretty quickly. And I think we knew that because we saw it happen in each of the conflicts with Hamas. So it's become totally predictable. But there was ordinarily, if Hamas attacks, there's ordinarily a period of expression of sympathy and solidarity. That expression of sympathy and solidarity for lots of people didn't last 15 seconds this time around. The sudden explosion of anti-Semitism of notable faculty around the West, not just in the US, in Canada, in Britain, not so much in France and Germany. In Germany, you can risk being really a legal problem with anti-Semitism if you're too loose in making the generalizations that people got away with in the English-speaking countries. But in the English-speaking countries, at least, there was an immediate flood of sentiment. The one thing we can say about that, I think we have to say about it, is that given the almost instant character of the anti-Semitism that swept Western universities and major cities, New York, London, San Francisco, to some degree, Paris. Um, there had to have been a massive reserve of anti-Semitism in waiting. It simply, it could not have arisen ab ovo out of nothing. It could not have come from elsewhere. It really had to be there already. And that means I at least didn't know that that was so much rapid, absolutely the case. And I don't really know anyone else who would have predicted that or would have understood the depth of the reserve of anti-Semitism waiting in reserve. And I think that needs an explanation. I mean, yes, anti-Semitism has always, for 2,000 years, been available. The Jews have been available as a scapegoat for longer than we can remember, for all of recorded history, basically. But that doesn't explain the phenomenon that we have encountered. So there's a question, and I'm not expecting you can answer it. I think it's a question for all of us that I think we have to think about. However, I do think there are some things that we can do. And some of the things that we can do on campus are very modest. Not everything is a revolution. At its worst, DEI imagines that it's going to change the world. Well, good luck. It ain't happened. It won't happen. I don't think we necessarily need to change the world. We can do very simple things. I mean, if you want the simplest things campuses can do, don't schedule major events on the high holidays. There's occasional campuses that have their first day of classes on Yom Kippur. Don't do it. If there are Orthodox students on campus, make 3 meals a day of Orthodox meals available to them. Minor practical things like that. I think we have to take seriously the need to introduce anti-Semitism training, training about the history of anti-Semitism and about its current cultural conditions, especially for all campus uh, tasks and all campus constituencies that are involved in student-facing activities. So starting with resident advisors in dormitories and moving through faculty members, people who are engaged with Jewish students need to be trained about anti-Semitism. That's harder than giving 3 kosher meals a day, but it's still an achievable goal. It's not a nightmare, a difficult goal. More difficult still would be adopting the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which I still think is the single most useful educational tool that we can put to use on campuses. And I recommend adopting the IRA definition with a one-page statement of principles that says, this is what we will use IRA for, and this is what we will not use it for. We will use it to educate people about the categories of contemporary anti-Semitism. We will not use IRA as a disciplinary code. We will not use IRA as a judicial mechanism. So
Remind
those
people what the IRA definition is. Not everybody knows.
Sure. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which was really created in Europe, adopted the IRA definition of anti-Semitism in 2016. It modified a previous definition from the European Union. It made some changes in that definition and adopted it in 2016. And since then, over 1,000 government entities and NGOs, states in the United States have adopted it. The important thing about it, it begins with a one-paragraph universal definition of anti-Semitism. And there are really a dozen such paragraphs out there, and they're all okay. I mean, none of them is perfect, but they're all useful. What's important about IRA, and the most controversial part of IRA, is that the definition includes 11 examples of major categories of contemporary anti-Semitism. An example, treating Israel as a version of the Nazi state, or criticizing Israel in ways that are not applied to any other country. And the IHRA definition says very clearly, if you make a criticism of Israeli policy that's comparable to what's complained about in the case of other nations, it's not anti-Semitic. All such criticisms are part of normal discourse, and they don't count as anti-Semitism. The six elements of IHRA that address Israel are the most controversial, but without them, we really can't make progress in helping students to understand the phenomenon. Anti-Semitism is complex, varied. The IHRA definition gives 11 helpful examples, and that helps you think about what's special about anti-Semitism in the contemporary world. Anti-Semitism, of course, has gone through huge changes over time. The religious anti-Semitism that dominated at least from the 14th through the 18th centuries, eventually at late 19th century, was replaced by a kind of racial anti-Semitism, which of course the Nazis excelled in and did more with than any other nation has done since. Anti-Semitism changes, but it has retained one constant element, which is not only the hatred of Jews, but the prevalence of various conspiracy theories in defining anti-Semitism. So anyway, those are some of the practical things I think that we could do. You could comment on those, or if you'd like, say what you think explains the explosion of anti-Semitism in the wake of the Hamas attacks.
Thank you, Carrie. We have several questions coming in, and I want to start with a commentary maybe. This is, okay, let's see here. This is more a comment than a question, but I want to read it before I go to a question. This is Steve, who says, I am not an expert on postmodern thinking, but recently I have been reading its literature as well as commentary on it. And what strikes me as a 75-year-old with a classical education at elite universities is the surprising lack of nuance in the postmodern worldview. For example, in my doctoral training, I and my fellow students were continually challenged to tolerate ambiguity. My impression is that now students are taught to ignore ambiguity and instead view the world in terms of simplistic binaries, such as oppressor, oppressed, colonial, decolonial, etc. And actually, this is probably linked to another question that was asked. Maybe if you could draw more of a link, Moshe, between this, binary between colonial, decolonial, and oppressor and oppressed. Can you draw a more direct line from what you describe as being the laudable goal of converting the university towards the betterment of society to reducing anti-Semitism on campus?
I'll give you an example from Rice University. So we recently we made a shocking discovery that Mr. Rice, who gave the money to start Rice University, he was a Texas businessman. And what a shocker. Before the Civil War, he had enslaved people working for him. Okay? So this somehow came as a shock to people. And now they had a hard time living with the fact that his statue is at the center of the campus. Now, it turns out that this is just part of very early racist history of pride. History is not always pretty, okay? I mean, you go back, first of all, in his will, he only wanted Rice would only take white male students. I mean, it was a while before female were admitted. It was a while before blacks were admitted. So Rice has to reckon with its history. And the response at Rice has been major remodeling of the inner quad. So the statue will not be at the center, but will be at the corner. And this probably cost millions of dollars. And I said, wow, imagine we took these millions of dollars, and just about 2 miles from Rice, we have a very poor black neighborhood. imagine we took that money and we said, what can we do to improve their education? That would be a real thing instead of just, to me, virtue signaling. Let's really look what can we do to make the world a better place, and let's do away with just virtue signaling, drawing Nazi soldier in a diverse way. Okay, I look at that, and Reich made a big deal about, look, we have remodeled, we're acknowledging our history. Of course, you acknowledge your history. That's good, but do something which benefits society. Okay, let's start to think of what this is our mission to contribute to the common good. Let's take it seriously. We're not taking it seriously, in my opinion. We got so entrapped in the pursuit of money and prestige, we forgot what the key mission is. And to me, and there's no obvious way. There's not as if there is a formula. How do you pursue the common good? Let's start by talking about it. Let's start to talk to our students about it. This is, to me, the main value that we have lost. And part of it is a theory, and I will leave it to psychologists to do the research to say, well, I'm right or wrong, is that people do need to feel the need to do some virtue signaling. And part of DEI came out of the need to do virtue signaling. And part of the DEI culture is that white is bad, okay? And white people feel guilty. And I think some of what's happening with anti-Semitism, to answer Kari's question, is it's not just scapegoating in general, it's just scapegoating for white guilt, okay? So suddenly, I mean, I never consider myself white. I mean, I'm a second-generation Holocaust survivor. I learned about anti-Semitism. I remember where I read, I wasn't there, but I remember when in Europe they said, Jews, go to Palestine. We don't want you here. Go to Palestine. And Jews were not considered white in Europe. And suddenly, I'm a privileged white person. So we lost our moral bearings, it seems to me. And that's where I would kind of start, by how do we regain our moral bearing?
So we have a similar question in the same line. A member of our audience is saying, why are we not talking about building critical thinking and capabilities to promote equality of opportunity that will be for the common good? What do you think about the idea of critical thinking and as it relates to the problems you've highlighted?
Right now at Rice, we have a conversation about general education, but we kind of have a problem, a little bit of converging there, because people mean at least three different things by general education. One is that for accreditation, we need to do something for Gen Ed. So what do we do to meet accreditation requirement? The second thing, that people still have a dream that even though Rice used to be a very techy school, people would like to be a liberal arts school, and that's what Gen Ed should be about. But the third one is about plugging in deficiency, looking at students, finding out, okay, what are the weaknesses on one hand, they get great education at Rice. On the other hand, what are the weaknesses that we need to address? That to me requires some research. So I'd like to see, critical thinking. Yes, I'm all in favor of critical thinking. I try to think critically as much as I can, starting with myself. But I'd like to see the research that will show our students like critical thinking. And I think part of it, we need to look to see, and this I hear from some, not all, but some of my colleagues in the humanities, and they bemoan what happened to the humanities, how they become entrapped in these ideologies. This is just ideologies, Foucault, okay? And I listen to this, there is no truth, only power. And I said, it's a paradox. Where does this statement come from? Does it come from power or does it come from truth? And so, and again, I'm not in the humanities. I'm not an expert in humanities, but I hear vibes from within the humanities bemoaning what happened to humanities. Humanities anyway tend to be in crisis because in our neoliberal society, students come to college to get a good job. And going to humanities does not give you a good job. And I've told our Dean of Humanities they suffer from what I call major envy. They think that the thing that they should have, like physics or computer science, is a very successful major. We need successful majors in the humanities. So you have an opportunity to have a greater mission, to teach the whole university, except we call it service teaching. And as soon as we attach the word service to it, somehow become a second-class activity. Instead of thinking of service as something noble, serving society should be something noble. Somehow, service teaching is a second-class activity. No. The important thing is major. Humanity have a chance, but they need to recover the real humanities, and that's a challenge. That again, I don't know enough about humanities to figure out how they can do that.
Thank you. So Linda is asking this question. She references extensive research by Heather MacDonald that shows that when elite universities embrace students who do not have basic reading, writing skills, more than 50% of these students do not excel, even with remedial support, do not stay to graduate. Nina, do you need a new plan for supporting those students? Do we need a new plan for supporting those students?
So there is something interesting about diversity, which is if you look at the reporting, we usually report about the incoming class. I'd like to see reports about the graduating class. And one of the issues is, in fact, I remember reading a book many years ago, Choosing a College by Thomas Sowell, who is a very well-known very conservative black economist at the Hoover Institution. And I read it because I need to advise my son how to go to college. I didn't know much about the American college system, so I read the book. And he had a chapter for black students. And he said, don't go to the top school that admit you, because you're going there partly for window dressing, so they'll have good statistics. You have to go to a place where you have a good chance of success. And so the real issue is you have to admit students that one will have a chance at succeeding. You have to invest in them. You have to make, we need to think about the educational model where these students can have a chance of success. And I mean, until we start to report the diversity statistic of the graduating class, it's just window dressing.
Thank you. So we have another question, a related question regarding free speech on campus. What is the responsibility of university administrators to enforce codes of conduct? What should those parameters be, especially in a society that has a high tolerance for anti-Semitism, and even more so for fanatical anti-Israeli bigotry in the form of harassment, intimidation, and even the threat of force?
When you come to freedom of expression, one is you have to make a difference between public universities and private universities, because they operate under different set of rules. Public universities, they have to follow the organ of the state. So there it's a different issue. Now, private universities, for example, we have at RISE a policy against discrimination and harassment. And that's a policy that limits speech on campus. Okay? Our code of student conduct forbids intimidation. And I think, the obvious thing that people have mentioned is, if you are allowed to chant on RISE campus, Zionists are not welcome here, just substitute blacks are not welcome here. And everybody knows, everybody who tells me otherwise, it's just gaslighting us. Everybody knows that if there were chances at RISE, blacks are not welcome here, something organic will hit the fan. And everybody knows it. And try to pretend otherwise, to me, just gaslighting. And so we should just, again, we operate under somewhat different set of rules. It's a little more difficult for us because we have to say what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. But for example, I think glorification of violence should not be acceptable. I mean, if you look at the protests at RISE, people call them pro-Palestinian protests. Pro-Palestinian would say they want a ceasefire, they want a Palestinian state. I can imagine pro-Palestinian protests that I will join. But that's not what you hear them. If you look at the set of an encampment, if you look at the set of chants, Zionists get out, Intifada revolution, there is very little there which I find pro-Palestinian. And that's part of the issue, should we, after the debacle of the three presidents in Congress, Vice President came up with a statement that genocide is bad. And I thought, oh my goodness, how low have we sunk that you get brownie points for saying that genocide is bad? But more difficult, what about Intifada chants? So to me, the analog intifada chants would be, imagine that the KKK would come to campus with no chant, only white hood, white robes, and burning crosses. No chant, just quiet, marching quietly. What would people say? People would say, this is a threat of violence. Why? Because the history is, when somebody came up with this uniform and a burning cross, you know that this is a threat of violence. So the historical context does matter. So when people talk about the Intifada was a terror campaign. It was about 1,000 civilians who were murdered. I lost 2 good friends who were just murdered. And to start the pretend, Intifada is about uprising, about independence. This will be like saying, that burning crosses is a symbol of Southern heritage. I mean, we just have to do the analogy and to see what is acceptable, what is not acceptable.
Thank you. We actually have a question about the misuse and distortion of the word genocide and what we should say about it. Witness what VP Kamala Harris said last evening and what she has said in the recent past. To the students who have accused Israel of genocide, she replied, "You're entitled to your truth." And last evening, to the angry individual ranting and 20,000 supposed child deaths in Gaza, real, I respect you. What an example. What would you say about this?
My first of all answer is nobody is entitled to their truth. I don't believe that people are entitled to their opinions. They're not entitled to their truth. Okay? Now, what's happened, look, I mean, this talk was not about what's happening in the Middle East. Okay? I mean, this talk was about what's happening on Rice campuses. Okay? I happen to think what happened in Gaza is tragic. We can go and debate who is responsible. If I had a choice, I would take the leadership of Israel, the leadership of Hamas, the leadership of Iran, and the leadership of Hezbollah, and throw them all into some remote island. Okay, if this was my choice, but nobody is asking me. But there are. I mean, I'm listening a few days ago. I'm listening to NPR, and they're interviewing a diplomat that just came back from the Sudan, where what's happening in Sudan is order of magnitude worse than what's happening in Gaza. That is not to belittle what's happening in Gaza, okay, or in Lebanon, but what in Sudan is much worse. And the reporter of NPR is asking the diplomat, how come we're not hearing more about the Sudan? And I'm thinking, we're not hearing because you're not reporting it. Where do you hear? You hear every time I turn the news on NPR, I hear about the Middle East. I hear nothing about the Sudan. Once in a while, once in a week, maybe you hear about the Sudan. Somehow they've decided what's interesting, what's not interesting. It's like what my colleague says, Arab killing Arab, it's not news. In Sudan, it's a civil war, it's not news. So this idea that this is about sympathy, I have a hard time with it because there are other places to feel sympathy for and to try to do something about. Okay?
Thank you. Maybe we can finish with this question. How can Jewish faculty become visible, especially to Jewish students on campus?
This is something that we are kind of a bit struggling with. So we have, in fact, if you look at Rice among students, we had 2 Jewish student organizations, one associated with Hillel and one associated with Chabad. Now there is this new one that is student supporting Israel, but there's really no student club just for Jews who don't necessarily want to Hillel, they don't want Chabad, they just want to be with other Jews. It's just starting now, okay? It's just starting now. Rice is a small school, and the Israelis are a small group. There are about 20 Israelis at Rice, faculty, staff, and students. So I have been able to just by word of mouth kind of create a mailing list for these 20 people, and I try to just invite them, at least once a semester to my house. Let's sit there so people can come and talk and share. We're just now trying to organize what we call a Jewish networking group. So just a place for people to talk to each other. We've been completely unorganized. Everybody is carrying a lot on what's happening in the past year. And I don't even necessarily know, I don't even know necessarily. I have many colleagues. Are they Jewish? Are they not Jewish? Should I try to bagel them, as they say? So now we have tried to form, people will sign up, and it remains to be seen how it works, but we're trying to put together both faculty and staff, not students, faculty and staff, all have a place to talk about not just Gaza, not about Sinwar, but also about Jewish holidays, for example.
Thank you. Thank you, Moshe. You've given us a lot to think about, food for thoughts. And I'm going to turn to Julie for the final words.
Thank you so much, Corinne, for doing a masterful job of moderating this as usual. Dr. Vardy, thank you for your time and your very interesting talk. Gave us a lot to think about. And I want to thank you for your efforts, not only in the field of computing, in which you're a giant, but in your efforts to combating anti-Semitism on your campus. Thank you, Carrie, for being a panelist, in your words, and Jim as well. And I do want to give a shout out to Ryan, who I don't know. Thank you for your last minute sort of technical expertise, and Heather as well for helping to organize the technical aspects as well. This talk has been recorded. We need to edit out the first part. Sorry if there were any technical difficulties. We moved from a regular Zoom meeting to a larger webinar, and there was some communication issues in between. But thank you to all the attendees. And you should see this talk up on the Psychologist Against Anti-Semitism website if you're a psychologist or a mental health professional. Although we have folks who are not mental health professionals in our group, feel free to join. It's free. And all you have to do is click on the link on the homepage and we will add you to the Google list. So thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for inviting me to this forum. Bye-bye.
Bye now.